Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge is a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services with a primary marketing focus on the Port of Anchorage, providing their customers with quality-based service specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to the Thursday edition of Alaska Weather. Today is March 19th, 2015, and when we're not on air, you can always catch our information on our website by going to www.arh.noaa.gov or simply type in weather.gov and navigate to the destination of your choice. There you can also find our social media at the top of the headlines. You can find social media and then click further to find the YouTube videos, Twitter, and Facebook links. And then we also have our weather information line at 1-800-472-0391. And now in just a moment, we're going to be on to your public forecast and aviation and weather and your marine weather. Looking at the headlines for today, we had the vernal equinox set for March 20th this year, 2015, and that's going to occur at 2:45 p.m. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that there's approximate equal daylight and nighttime hours across the equator. Like I said, it's just an approximation, and we've already, here in Anchorage at least, and across the state, even longer daylight hours than nighttime. So what does it mean overall? Well, it means we're certainly on into spring. So also yesterday denoted a Homer record. They had the highest warm temperature on March 18th, and that was not just for the day, it was also for the month, and that was previously set on March 18th was 47 degrees in 1981. So looking also ahead, we have another warm front that's going to move into the southeast on Friday, and just to the north, not very spring-like, because they have blowing snow up there across the north slope, and that's going to occur through there Friday. Now, just taking a look at the weather systems that are heading towards the east, we have one comma cloud right here noted just to the south of the eastern Aleutians, and putting that into motion, you can see that spin. This large upper low pressure system is going to be what is moving many of the warm fronts towards our area. So just taking a look one more time, we have a stream of moisture coming in behind colder temperatures across the western Aleutians there in the darker gray. And a closer look to home, we have two low pressure systems on the satellite. This low pressure system south of the Gulf waters has got a large warm front with rain extending out towards the Dixon entrance. And then we have another low pressure system that's just to the south of Kodiak Island, pushing a weak frontal system here, and putting that into motion, you can see the advancement of the low pressure systems. Now, this low pressure system that's advancing to Kodiak is not as strong as the system to its south that's heading up towards the Dixon entrance with the plume of moisture. Now, looking at the maps today, here's the two surface lows across the southern area, the southwestern area of the Gulf. It's a 990 millibar low, and mainly just rain developing along here. Gusty winds are occurring along the south and western areas of the Gulf of Alaska, with rain occurring mainly along the center. Now, off to the east, we have a 996 millibar low with a warm front extending just to the south of the Dixon entrance, and that'll be the focus for tonight. Mainly across the central and southern interior areas of Alaska, they experience clear to partly cloudy skies. However, along the north area, the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, back towards the Seward Peninsula, very tight pressure gradient here as high pressure remains just to the north across the Arctic, and then lower pressure across the south has kept a tighter gradient and gusty winds in this area. Some snow was occurring just along the eastern Beaufort Seacoast earlier today. And then the stationary boundary is also here as we have much colder temperatures just staying along and north of the Brooks Range. Across the western areas of the state, we have some light snow just blowing off the coastal areas and across the central areas of the Bering. And that extends all the way back towards Shimia. Now, as we head into tonight, we're expecting to see these snow showers and patchy fog conditions continue across much of the Bering as the low pressure system moves ahead of the main upper low that's just situated to the south here. So this is going to be pushing this towards Kodiak and mainly seeing rain with the system tonight and the gustier winds across the Bristol Bay and back towards also the western Gulf of Alaska. Stays mainly dry across the central interior for the overnight hours, and gusty winds will continue and pick up a little bit further to the northwest there during the overnight hours. So expect blowing snow to reduce visibilities, but there's no products out at this time as it's just very light snow blowing around the area. So looking at the low pressure system that's moving towards the southeast, this will lift the rain towards the Dixon entrance during the overnight hours. So ahead of the system, there will be a few breaks in the clouds and possibilities for patchy fog to develop. And then as this low pressure system moves north into Friday, enough cloud cover will bring the patchy fog conditions. However, they will hang on to light rain for most of the day across the southeast. Across south central, once again, it'll be mostly clear conditions, some clouds making it around the backside of this low pressure systems, but should see some breaks during the afternoon hours, even possible across the Kenai. Now during the morning time across the Prince William Sound, expect to see patchy fog conditions. Again, this will improve by late morning. The blowing snow conditions will continue across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast through your Friday, all the way back towards the northwestern areas of the state near Point Lay. And then across the Bering, the conditions are not going to change as this high pressure system slowly shifts its center towards the Kamchatka area, and then this low pressure system stays in place, and therefore we'll have this tighter gradient, mainly gusty winds between 20 to 30 miles per hour with higher gusts up to 40 miles per hour across the central areas of the Bering. And then as we head into your Saturday forecast, another low pressure will be making its way towards the Gulf. The low pressure system working across the southeast will bring some light rain continuing on Saturday, and we'll see perhaps a few showers across areas of the Copper River Valley and also the eastern Kenai as some wraparound moisture makes it on the backside of this low pressure system. So best chance for the southern areas of the state back towards Bristol Bay even. Chance of a mix of snow and rain showers, mainly snow across the mountains, and then we'll see dry slotting conditions, meaning drier on the west side of the mountains as the moisture makes it across and gets rained out mainly over the mountaintops. Across the central interior parts of the state, mostly clear conditions and quiet. And then across the northern areas of the state, it'll get quieter across the northeast with patchy fog conditions continuing through the beginning of the weekend. The blowing snow conditions will then be across the Bering Strait, and then the snow conditions and winds will continue across the central areas of the Bering on Saturday. Now taking a look at the temperatures today, it was the warmest across the southeast with a high of 55 degrees hit at Klowok this afternoon, but mainly in the 40s across the southeast and along the Gulf waters had made it all the way up into the upper 40s today. Now across the central interior, also seeing those warm conditions up into the mid-30s to lower 40s, and then holding on to those cold temperatures during the afternoon from the Brooks Range north, and the coldest temperatures were felt out at Point Lay, actually reaching up to minus 11 degrees this afternoon. A quick change from the just below 0 to 20 and above across the Seward Peninsula, and the southwestern areas, Bristol Bay and the Kuskokwim Delta, saw well up into the upper 30s. Across the Alaska Peninsula into the 40s, and across the Bering into the mid-30s with cooler temperatures on the western Bering along 32 over there at Shimia. not too much change in the temperatures. It's going to stay mostly in the lower to mid-30s across the Aleutians and the central areas of the Bering. And then across the southeastern areas and along the Gulf, mainly temperatures in the lower to mid-30s all the way towards Kodiak. Interior locations will drop dramatically overnight as they see the clearing skies. That'll allow them to cool into the lower teens. Across the north and northwestern areas, expect to stay under zero, lows to minus 15 to minus 20 degrees. Across the southwest, temperatures not as bad here, lows in the mid-20s. Now looking at your temperatures as we head into tomorrow, the warmest temperatures will be along the Gulf waters, warmest across the southeast in the mid-40s to near 50 once again at those southeastern areas. And then the southern areas of the state with the warmer systems coming up from the Gulf, we'll see temperatures hanging on into the upper 30s to mid-40s. And then along the north and northwest there, they'll get into the single-digit range. And along the west coast, we'll see that very quick rise into the 40s when you get to the Alaska Peninsula, hanging out in the 40s again for tomorrow, with the mid-30s noted across most of the Aleutians through the day. And then looking at your flying weather, with the low pressure system across the Alaska Peninsula or just south here, we'll stay MVFR for most of the day, and then we'll see IFR conditions in some of the mountainous areas, and then along the low pressure systems across the southeast and along the western Gulf waters. Looking at your past conditions in more depth for tomorrow, MVFR to VFR for Anaktuvuk Pass, and Adigan should mainly be VFR through the day. And then we'll see Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, both MVFR. Rainy will be MVFR, clearing to VFR later. And Windy Pass will be MVFR to VFR. Isabel will be MVFR to VFR as well. And Mentasta Pass will be MVFR to VFR, Tanita, VFR conditions, and MVFR to VFR conditions for Portage. And then we'll see Chilkoot and White Pass will mainly be MVFR conditions, but they will see a good amount of clouds for tomorrow. Your freezing level for tomorrow would be across the northern areas of the southeast and then draped along the Gulf Coast and into Bristol Bay. Freezing level mainly just skirt the central areas of the Bering. And then the 2,000-foot level would be along the western areas of the Gulf and the Alaska Peninsula, and then a slow rise to 4,000 feet across the southeast. Looking at your icing for tomorrow, possibility just to the north of the low pressure system there in the Gulf, and then below 8,000 feet around the areas of the low pressure system in the Bering, and below 5,000 feet across the North Slope areas. So be on the lookout for just mainly light icing in these areas as our conditions are improving. Here's the jet stream for tomorrow, an easterly flow just to the south of the Aleutian area, and it's between 90 to 100 knots, straight shot across the Pacific Ocean there. And then looking at your low pressure system at 9,000 feet, we have this change of direction around the low pressure with the strongest winds noted across the western Gulf there and into the Bering. So we have an easterly flow all across the Bering between 15 to 35 knots, the strongest winds across as you head towards the Bering Strait. Southerly flow primarily across the state between 15 to 25 knots, and then the stronger winds again around the low pressure system across the southeast with 35 knots there along the eastern part of the Gulf of Alaska. And then the lighter flow just across the central Aleutians around 15 knots out of the easterly direction. Here's that low pressure system at 3,000 feet, and we see a change of direction, very strong winds on the south side of Kodiak Island. They're racing at 50 knots out of the east, mainly an easterly flow across the state with the strongest winds here across the southern and northern areas between 30 and 35 knots. Across the eastern areas, very similar at 3,000 feet with southeasterly winds 40 knots. Looking at your turbulence, putting this all together, for tomorrow you'll expect turbulence below 5,000 feet across the southern Gulf, the southeast and Bristol Bay area, and then around 4,000 feet and below across the northern areas of the state, and it looks fairly calm across much of the area, but the easterly winds across will be fairly uniform to the surface for the bearing. All right, in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
Leo the Lion chases Orion. Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. It's that time of year again when the night skies almost shout, "Spring is here!"
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. The skies say spring is here because springtime's Leo the Lion is chasing winter's Orion and replacing him as the major constellation for early evening viewers.
Let's show you. Now, most of you know that Orion the Hunter is winter's most famous star pattern. If you go outside an early evening in December, you'll see Orion climbing up the eastern skies as a celestial announcement of the imminent arrival of winter.
And in the depths of winter, in January and February, Orion reaches his highest point in the heavens in early evening, almost bragging that he is the master of the season.
But then, as March begins, things start to change. Because all throughout March, Orion slowly relinquishes his high-flying position in early evening. By the beginning of April, Orion is tipped over on his side in the southwest, almost hanging onto the sky for dear life, as if he knows that in just a few weeks, he will be gone from evening skies until next winter.
And it's this position of Orion in the southwestern heavens in early evening that always tells us that winter is coming to an end.
And although I'm always sad to see Orion's bright stars go, nevertheless, I'm happy to see a much bigger, although less bright, constellation take its place almost overhead in early evening. Leo the Lion roaring that he is master now and that he will dominate spring skies.
In fact, if you go out any night in late March or April in early evening, you'll see Leo casually reclining almost overhead, just as the ancient Egyptians depicted him in a regal sphinx-like position, very self-assured that winter and Orion will soon be history.
His head and forequarters are indicated by a backward question mark with the bright blue-white star Regulus marking his heart. His rear is marked by a triangle of stars with Leo's second brightest star, Denebula, marking his tail.
Now, in ancient times, lions were often associated with royalty. And in fact, Leo's brightest star, Regulus, means the little king. But little it is not. Some latest measurements indicate that it is more than 1.5 times the diameter of our almost 1 million mile wide sun. But because it is a much hotter star, it is actually 140 times brighter. And because it is a whopping 80 light years away, this means that when we look up at Regulus this spring, we see the light that left it 80 years ago.
Curiously, however, even though Denebula is half as far, only 40 light years away, and even though it is much bigger than our sun is, it nevertheless appears dimmer than Regulus. Why? Because it is much cooler, only 20 times brighter than our sun. Even so, if we moved either Denebula or Regulus as close to the Earth as our sun is, we'd all be crispy critters. And this year, Leo has a bright visitor who comes around every 12 years, the king of the planets, Jupiter. Jupiter is above Regulus, and if you really want to get picky about it...
Oh, let's get picky.
Okay, Jupiter is actually in the constellation Cancer the Crab. It was in Leo earlier this year, but Jupiter has been backing up along the ecliptic.
Retrograde motion.
And left Leo at the end of January and re-entered Cancer. It will stay in Cancer throughout early June, but then something really cool is going to happen.
Yeah, what's that bright thing coming into the picture?
That's Venus. And at the end of June, Venus and Jupiter are going to pass super close.
Don't tell me. We're going to be treated to another Albury conjunction. I know how much you obsess about them.
I do not obsess. Conjunctions between Venus and Jupiter are really special celestial events, and I can't wait.
So, welcome in spring the cosmic way. Simply go outside in early evening any night in late March and April, look toward the southwest, and
you'll see Orion, the master of winter, on his way out, and almost overhead, Leo the Lion, the king of spring. Keep looking up.
Hello and welcome back to the show, and we'll be on to your marine forecast and another summary of your forecast in just a moment. Now, looking at the Cook Inlet, there is no change from yesterday, and they're just pretty much going to be in a steady state for the Cook Inlet, as we have a system that's going to be stationary as we head through the next 2 days. So don't expect the sea ice to be growing any further. That's just pretty much going to stay steady as we head into the weekend. Now, looking at your forecast for the southeast. Now, Friday, we're going to have a northerly flow across the inner channels and become southeasterly across those southern channels, and then also a south to easterly flow across the outer waters. And then we do have quite a few small crafts out there. Beware for the gusty winds across the inner channels for your day on Friday. We'll see seas between 5 to 6 feet, and then for your outer waters between 10 and 12 feet. As we head into your Saturday, stronger winds across the northern areas there with the gale warning at 35 knots, and then across the inner channels, basically winds will come from the north to the southeasterly direction once again, and we'll see seas between 3 to 4 feet across the inner channels, and then a southerly flow across the outer waters with wind speeds between 15 to 30 miles per hour here, with small crafts as you go further north. And as we look at across the western waters, we'll also see small crafts across much of the area. For your Friday, winds will be out of the north to northeasterly direction, except just to the south of Kodiak Island here, we'll see a southeasterly flow, and then winds a little bit lighter speeds across the Prince William Sound, 10 knots out of the north, 2 feet for your sea conditions, and then 8 to 12 feet across the western Gulf locations. Ice across the northern inlet and seas between 9 to 12 feet as you head towards the southern inlet into the Shelikof Strait. For your Saturday forecast, lighter winds on tap for your weekend, and then we'll see an easterly flow with variable winds across the Barren Island, Shelikof Strait, a northerly flow across the inlet, and then very small seas around the Prince William Sound, the 2 foot there, and then around 6 feet across the western areas of the Gulf. So your better day on the water if you're out there is definitely going to be your Saturday. Shelikof Strait and Barren Islands will also see 2 feet seas all the way up to the southern inlet. Now across the Alaska Peninsula, strong winds tomorrow from the north, and then it backs around to the easterly direction, northeasterly direction across the Bristol Bay and the northern areas of the Alaska Peninsula, and we'll see between 20 to 30 knot winds. Seas across the Bering will be 4 to 7 feet, and then 8 to 10 feet across the Pacific side. And then your Saturday, lighter wind speeds on tap for the Alaska Peninsula area. For your beginning of the weekend, between 10 to 20 knots, and that's going to be out of the easterly direction, and very lighter, better sea conditions this day, between 1 to 6 feet across Bristol Bay and the Bering side, and 6 feet across the North Pacific. Now, looking at your Friday forecast across much of the Aleutians, we'll see a north to northeasterly flow with seas along the Bering side between 6 to 9 feet, and then across the Pacific side will be between 7 and 8 feet. And like I said, that's out of the north to northeasterly direction, which is pretty much the flow again on your Saturday forecast. Small craft advisory on this day, so a little bit stronger winds for most of the area. Seas between 6 to 8 feet for the conditions across the Aleutians. The western coast will see for your Friday small crafts for much of the area, and then we'll also have freezing spray conditions in the northern part of the Bering here. So look for a northeasterly flow, and where there's ice-free waters for 4-foot seas across just south of the Nunivak Island, and 5 to 8 feet across the central areas of the Bering. For your Saturday forecast, another day of northerly flow between 20 to 25 knots, small craft across much of the area, or brisk winds where we have ice there, and then the seas will be 7 feet across the central areas and northern areas. Now across the north and northwest coast for your Friday, expect 20 to 30 knot winds, and it'll all be mainly out of the north and northeasterly direction again here, and east to northerly direction becoming northwest towards Kotzebue Sound on your Saturday, and then the strongest winds will be along the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, with the lighter wind speeds just across the northwest, stronger winds across the Kotzebue Sound and Chukchi Sea. Now again, to recap your forecast, we have 2 low pressure systems at the surface pushing fronts, one across the western areas of the Gulf and one heading into the southeast. Clearer conditions allow colder temperatures overnight for the central areas, blowing snow across the north and northwest. For the Bering, we'll see conditions continue with the gustier winds and snowier conditions as we head into your Friday. The low pressure system across the Alaska Peninsula is going to begin to weaken. However, watch out for some gusty winds across the western Gulf and areas of the Alaska Peninsula. And then the low pressure system across the southeast will be bringing rain through the day, with temperatures still warmer as this is a warm frontal system. Stays dry again for another day on Friday across the central and southern areas, with patchy fog possible across the Prince William Sound early in the day. And then across the north and northwest, still continue to watch for those gusty winds between 20 to 30 miles per hour, higher gusts possible up to 40 miles per hour, and then the blowing snow conditions across the northern coast there. Into Saturday, we'll see the stronger winds across the Bering Strait with the gusty winds and snow, and patchy fog remains across the Arctic waters in the northwest coast. Low pressure will be weakening across the Gulf waters here, so lighter rain for the southeast on Saturday with a mix of rain and snow across much of the south central and the southwestern areas near Bristol Bay. And then we'll mainly see snow continuing once again across the central Bering areas and rain across the Alaska Peninsula. And don't forget, tomorrow is the vernal equinox, and our highlights of the day again was the Hoeppner reaching up to 54 degrees yesterday, breaking their old monthly record. So tomorrow we will be in longer daylight hours. We've already reached the midpoint for daylight versus nighttime. So enjoy the warmer conditions across the central areas. I know you're still cold across the north slope, but we are well on our way into spring. Have a good night. It was great being with you.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.